guys. Yay! Yes. Thanks. All right, guys. So I think a lot of people gathered here sense that we might be approaching a time of instability. I feel like a lot of you guys who are here have a sense of that. And that might be part of what brings you to this, although you might be here for purely reasons of joy. Both are possible. Times of instability are good times to consider what trajectory we might push towards, as our efforts might have more impact now than at other times. And I also recommend looking into the guy who wrote the book called Anti-Fragile, which basically says, if you can keep the upside of instability while being comfortable with the downside of instability, that's a great place to be in times that are likely to be unstable, and that's Anti-Fragile. So the title of the discussion tonight is The Transition to the Next Civilization. The word transition does half the work in the title, pointing us to the process of changing from one thing to another. And we can talk here about the pace of the change, the essential bits of the starting conditions. We can talk about the unevenness of the change, the how to involve yourself in the change, how to relate to it. And then the second question is, where is it headed? What are the possible shapes that the next civilization takes? Recognizing that in practical experience of these shifts as they happen, the lines between one form and the other are not hard and fast, and the timelines are not like overnight, like a Disney dystopian movie. So, what are the likely key influences that lead you to one where or a different where? The people who are here all have thought a lot about this, and that's a good enough reason to be here. So I'm starting out, so I recently was at the Biodynamic Conference, and Steiner in his agricultural lectures talks a lot about the chaos inherent in the seed. So he's saying the seed is sensitive and unformed, and it allows the cosmic forces to imprint upon it. And since then, I've heard about the image of the cocoon. 3 times the image of the cocoon, or the imago, which was a word I didn't even know like 2 months ago, have come to me, which, you might think that when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly inside a cocoon, it's like, I don't know, shrinking and like growing wings. But it actually turns into just like undifferentiated jelly and then like reforms as a different animal. So that's not an image worth considering. And so do you guys think, the first question is, I want you guys to talk about, do you think we're in the chaos of the seed? Will you experience the chaos of the seed? Or do you feel like the continuity of these like legacy structures that we're held in is more powerful than the chaos of civilization sort of reaching its zenith alongside of like peak everything resource-wise? So the chaos of the seed is the first image that I wanted to put out in terms of like culture. And I'm curious what you think about that image.
You're going to take a poll?
No,
she's only asking us.
I'm asking you, it's a fish back. I'm sorry. Come on in, world.
Is it happening one or the other?
You guys Susana's so ready.
I'm going to say very little bit, but my first thought is that the seed is still buried. It's still there. It always will be. And the legacy structures, doesn't know what you said? But they will fail. Right. At some point. So how that happens, I don't know. But the seed is what we are doing now. And we're bringing back seed of knowledge, seed of skills, seed of human health and nutrition. We need to create more seed before that time. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. are so teaching already.
Michelle Long's points.
Yeah, I would say from my experience in the organic movement, a lot of the legacy structures that my parents built 40 years ago feel like they are collapsing. I was just having this conversation in the very recent time about the homesteading community and movement, and there's a massive homesteading movement that's coming from the politically other quote-unquote side right now, and all the organic organizations and NOFAs and OFAs and FOSSas and VABFs and things like that are completely missing the boat because of their, I would say ossified structure, that because they're no longer coming from that visceral upwelling of people committed to a thing because they've gotten more bureaucratized. But for me, I see the bubbles of excitement and transition happening everywhere. I think it's brilliant and exhilarating. Yeah, I think I'm excited about cultural quote unquote collapse, about systemic implosion. I think what's been done over the past few hundred years through the Western framework, quote unquote, has been deeply destructive. There are some very powerful insights, which I think will continue forward. But I think there's also a bunch of insight from other cultural trajectories, whether it's India and China or Africa or indigenous cultures. I feel like maybe now with the internet and the ability to communicate with each other, directly, constantly, from anywhere to everywhere, the ability to learn and share and pull the best pieces from all the different spots is available to us in a way it wasn't before. So if we're going through a birth canal of pain and transition and shift from one level of being to another, certainly reality is going to change. I think a lot of things need to change, and that's exciting that we're being forced to by, we call them resource constraints. So yeah, I see this as a time of exhilarating opportunity, personally. But maybe that's because I got myself a homestead a while ago, and I'm not totally off the grid, but basically my cost of life is really, really low, and I've got that grounded resilience with nature, nowhere near to the degree that indigenous cultures have, but in relation to people in my town or people in my state, having gotten a point of effectively, high levels of resiliency, give me the freedom to feel like, how can I help, as opposed to my life is collapsing. So I'll just stop right there.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that also, and that
You don't hold it close.
and that a lot of those sorts of things that we have looked to other cultures, other places to instruct ourselves, like that's important, that's there, and that a lot of what we need to do is continue building intimacy between ourselves and all of those things. Like we're all coming from a place where our ancestors were all living with intimacy, with nature, with each other, working effectively, listening to one another, and then acting on that and developing infrastructure around that, which I call culture. Just kind of like that sustainable way of being together, being with nature, and that's within us. It's also within everyone. And that's so much like I think where we're at right now is about needing to listen to each other and really soak things in. And that's so to go with the imagery of the seed, that all of those things are in the seed. Like there's a lot of other things that ultimately aren't going to be what we carry with us, like what gets carried on, things that aren't really serving us anymore. And so it's about watching for the things that are important, the things that are integral, the things that have been working, even if it's a tiny little piece, just like observing that, becoming more familiar with that, practicing that, and then letting it grow from that. Like not necessarily reaching for something because it's flashy or because it's working here or working there, but because we have it, it's like the things that haven't changed, right? So change is the only constant, they say, but really it's not. Like a lot of things change, a lot of things don't change. By seeing the things that don't change, we can all reach mutual consensus on what's working for us and kind of let that grow, like let that be the part that grows from the seed.
I would say that Caleb's food should not change. Just saying.
You just have your
Got one, and it should be on. Yep, you get.
Oh, you could be the box food.
Yeah, I think we passed the point of approaching instability a long time ago. I think that there's a collective saturation of an awareness of this across the species, and I think the pressure of that is squeezing a racial memory of deep past instability. We've been in some incredibly difficult places in the past. Nothing this novel and this many all at the same time, but I do think it's basically a sense of kind of a massive musical chairs game, and the music's about to stop, and there's not enough chairs. So it's really mandatory to build capacity. And so, yeah, there's a lot more to that, but I did see that there's
Eat it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I've used this analogy of everybody's experiencing hitting the snooze button in the morning on your alarm for the third or fourth time, and there's this sort of woozy sense of, okay, it's time to get up now. And I think I'm seeing that across the board everywhere I go. So yeah, it's an opportunity, and we might as well make it exciting.
It's gotta be exciting.
It's gonna be exciting, like jumping that lard on that fire pit down there, just got excited. I saw that. Well, everybody got some lard to bring home with them. The rest of it just went up and
There goes the crackling.
So I really like the imagery of the seed because, well, I guess for me this question is a little odd because I live my life like a seed. I raise my children like seeds, and going off of, I think you were saying we need to hold on to the things that work. The way that I like to think about this is if you save seeds, I guess, you'll know there's a big difference between hybrid seeds and heirloom seeds. So when I think of myself as a seed, I want to think of myself as an heirloom seed. So just the way that I was raised and also the way that I raise my children, we have a great respect for our authority of our grandparents and great-grandparents and the stories that they passed down to us. And that is more akin to an heirloom seed than a hybrid seed, where hybrid seeds, I look out and I kind of see people sometimes and I think the way they're raising their children is really like a hybrid. They're a new species that is a cross between something and it's producing something brand new with new characteristics, and it doesn't really have anything passed down from the people that came before them, the things that worked, the ways of thinking and living that actually worked for hundreds and thousands of years, really. So, yeah, that's just how I live my life. Like I see, I also come from people that are pretty hardcore. Like some of my family, they were leaving Germany to escape persecution, during the end of the World War II times. And then the other side of my family, my father's side, they were Sephardic Jews in Spain who escaped Spain to go to Mexico. So my whole thinking, I guess, my whole life has been, at any point, you have to be ready to start a new civilization. So the way that we eat, we dress, we interact with people, the way we raise our children is really like, it's with that imagery of a seed. We do, it's even how we think, like our boys carry the seed. So it's kind of goes right in line with that.
what you said about the kind of hybrid children, like who are something completely new and different. And I would add, with the like technocratic dream of some of the overlords or whatever, trying to create this hybrid between person and machine. And so the next question is about starting conditions. I really recommend everybody look into Nate Hagen's. He has a YouTube channel and everything like that. Speaking of tech hybrid, a good mind with the machine, but he's doing really good presentations. But just this notion of like the starting conditions of where we are, what are the key features of now? And I think one of them is that the next generation of children is like really ungrounded. So like I'm like reading like Vance Packard talking about A Nation of Strangers in 1969 when people started going to college and becoming uprooted from their home communities. And so I think that's one starting condition. I mean, there's obviously resource starting conditions that are worth talking about, like will probably pass peak oil. Natural gas pulled us along for a certain while. The fossil fuel pulse is going to pass. There's climate issues. There's like so many starting conditions to think about, plus organizational ones. So I just want you guys to talk about what do you think are the kind of like key starting conditions that are affecting which way we're likely to go.
Can I start with that one? So for me, it's really simple. A lot of people are raising children. Children are born children, and they need to raise adults. So if we think about, we're not raising a child, we actually want to raise an adult who is part of a community, who is contributing. It kind of changes our perspective as a parent and adult to guide our children's life more, where we're guiding them into adulthood instead of raising children like so many people are doing now.
Yeah, I'm going to reference closely recently reading. I just read a book yesterday or the day before called Anastasia. Anybody heard of the Radiant Seeker series? This is a woman who was from a long line of indigenous people in Siberia, and was not far from being raised by animals. And her level of consciousness and being, that because of her never really being converted by culture, was such an amazing affirmation to the nature of who each of us is. And so, yeah, from my perspective, I think we've got everything we need. I think we are each brilliant, sentient drops of God, and our childhood experiences pervert us to one degree or another, to, in most cases, a profoundly large degree. And yeah, in my mind, the way out, the way forward, the path through the birth canal basically is back to nature, as close to nature as possible, as in deep relationship with nature as possible. I think nature has everything we need, and it's and what is nature? I mean, let's define terms. Mark and I were defining terms last night or right before last.
Nature or civilization.
Well, we were defining terms, and I'm saying let's define nature. In my lexicon, I use the terms God, nature, universe, love as synonyms. I think that there's a profound
Looks like Susana.
matrix within which we are constantly extant, and that is, call it life, call it nature. And I'd like to say we're all matriculated in the school of life. Like, you're being taught lessons by nature, by life, whether you are aware of it or not. You fail and you suffer pain. You succeed and you flourish. Like, if we could just stop thinking we're living in culture and start realizing we're living in nature, and you could use whatever you want as a word for that works for you. I think it's totally simple, absolutely beautiful, profoundly exciting and exhilarating, and bring on the lack of hydrocarbons. Yeah, bring it on. Mark's always talking about it. The only reason that we're so fat and lazy is because we don't have to do our work, because hydrocarbons are doing our work for us. So I'm not sure I'm convinced that we're in peak oil. I was a few years ago, and I was hoping it was true. I'm afraid it's not true, because there might be other ways in which we get our energy needs met without having to learn to reconnect with nature. So that's my fear, actually, is that we're going to have sufficient hydrocarbons and electricity and everything else to prevent us from needing to go back to that. So it might have to be a choice. It might have to be an actual choice we make from a place of empowerment, not from fear or scarcity. But I do think that that's where it all is, and it's completely exhilarating.
Yeah, I mean, we all have different definitions of stuff, and what you're getting at, like the difference between nature and culture, I might define that slightly differently, but I think ultimately we're meaning the same thing. Where I kind of think of, we are nature. Humans are nature, and a lot of the problems we've gotten ourselves into is separating ourselves from nature, like thinking of ourselves as above nature or somehow different. And so it's kind of like, to me, culture is human nature. And so, like in nature, there are food webs and different relationships between things, like plants that can't grow without certain mushrooms, or, whatever. It takes the entire web of life to have an intact system that is nature. And to me, so one way of describing the human aspect of that is culture. And so kind of like healthy culture, like separating that definition between maybe like culture or power over like the human culture that dominates nature, and then taking it back to where human culture is nature. And so, yeah, it's kind of like how in nature, no one thing lives alone. Like everything feeds off of it, supports everything else. And so much of what needs to happen is for us to not just section ourselves out. Like this is a lovely group. We're probably all part of a similar cultural group. And that in order to have something that actually works, like especially in a place like I live in, a very rural, traditional, old-fashioned part of Kentucky. And so really like reaching across to different cultural groups, like not sectioning ourselves off. Like we all have things to learn from each other. And as a starting point, like what do we have in common? Like what are the things, like you set up like a local sawmill where you're sawing trees that have already fallen. People are going to bring their trees. You're going to be meeting all kinds of different people. And then it's really nice not to have to go to Lowe's or whatever to buy your wood. It's like, everybody enjoys that cheap or free. And it's a powerful connective thing. It's like, then before you know it, you can set up an herbalism like center or whatever, station, shop. And you have people coming that are not necessarily part of our cultural group, but we're all bonding over the fact that these are powerful, healing, simple, healthy ways of living. And to me, that's the starting point. It's connecting with everyone. How do we bring everyone? How do we get to everyone? And not just keep on having conversations within our cultural group where we're already kind of moving towards those practices. Just like setting a big table. So like starting with a big table and a big heart and being ready to look over the differences, like not judging and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think the critical thing is to identify functional reference points, culturally, individually, and essentially reunite with our true anatomy, which is whatever you want to call it, nature, God, the full superorganism all connected. And if we can do that, and I talked today about our nervous system and how phenomenally, miraculously capable it is, that if we can energize that whole system and get out of this little tiny closet in the left brain that is fearful and afraid and can't really do much of anything, we can pretty much do anything. And I say that, but there's a tremendous amount of work to do in terms of the capacity building that if we really want to carry and care for the existing people here, there's very clear agenda. It's a matter of how do we get the energy to do it and how do we feel that connectivity to who we really are. So tall order, but as good as it ever gets. Yeah.
I really related a lot to the raising of adults. I just wanted to say, and as far as the buried seeds coming to fruition, I really feel like something you mentioned earlier today too has been very important to me, is that we need to regain human health in this country, and that really is about nutrient density, but as well just getting the toxins out of our food and finding a way to raise adults that don't have the lethargy and really, there's a lot of ways we've defined it today about we are not capable as a society of doing the things it takes to make that transition unless we have health in our children.
And this idea, I'm kind of shifting off some of my earlier thoughts about what to ask, but setting a big table, reaching out to more people, being able to bring in a broader group kind of along for this like ride that I feel like we're kind of designing together.
So that's
how are you guys working on that? Like, how do you because, and I also want to say tomorrow is a lot about that. Ken Meter's talking about building community food webs. I'm doing an asset mapping exercise. Ebony's talking about food buying clubs. I think, it's very social organization structure, is one track tomorrow, besides making cheese, which I also recommend because that's what you'd rather do. for learning the principles of biological systems. Because, you know, you have to actually make the cheese. You have to understand how to grow the forage properly that feeds the cow that makes the good cheese. And then you have to have the social organization to be able to like make it functionally possible to grow good cheese without going broke or like getting your land repossessed by a bank or something. So like, where are you guys putting your shoulder to the wheel? Talk about the places where you see that the best like lever points for intervention that you've observed. Some of you have already talked about it some today, but
I just quickly, since the people that were in my workshop probably have heard this, but some of the ways that I brought back the sense of intergenerational community learning and sharing things like the corn harvest and seed pooling, development of landrace seed for an area is a community activity, and that food is the identity of a local community is really around those things rather than Walden butternut squash, as I said, that goes across the country and has no flavor. We're bringing back a flavor. We're bringing back the local adaptation of our food. So it's our the pride and also that the children, say the corn harvest parties the things that I witnessed in Latin America where people pooled labor, pooled knowledge, passed that on to the next generation are things that we need to emulate. Whether it's, at first just as a festival like this one, it allows people, like you said, to have that hands-on experience of doing the work together as a community rather than alone. And that's really, combines replace that, machinery replace that for us. And it's a lonely place to be. It's on a huge tractor. And I know that. I grew up.
So I think we're living in a time period of great opportunity, and it all really boils down to food, but I'll explain this with a little story. So when I was 4 or 5, my grandma would read me a story about a chocolate maker. I don't remember the name of the story, but I'm just going to tell it. The chocolate maker, he comes into a town, he's making a high quality, delicious chocolate, and he's selling it at an X price. And as time goes on, he starts taking out the good ingredients. So over time, gradually, the people kept buying the chocolate for the same price. He's getting a bigger profit. But it gets to the point where the children are coming into the chocolate store and they're spewing out the chocolate. It doesn't taste right anymore. It's disgusting. So I think we're kind of going into this time period where McDonald's, Kroger, these places that people are sourcing most of their food from now, originally these places had a better food source. It actually tasted better than it does today. And what I do is I try to serve good, whole, local, nutrient-dense food to people wherever I go. So if I go to a church meeting, I'm taking something, and people will taste it. I cook weird things to them, okay? I cooked like a green curry, and I took it. People were coming by and said, I'm not sure about that, and they would keep coming back for seconds. So you just have to reintroduce, I think, these good foods. For example, my brother has a landscaping business, and we will take watermelons to our customers in July and August, September, and all the time we're getting comments, that was the best watermelon I ever tasted. Where did you get it? And we can have a conversation about heirloom seeds. Sometimes we give them plant starts now, and in the tasting of the foods that are actually nutrient dense and nutritious, they ask us the questions that get them started again doing these things, because it's kind of like the chocolate factory. People are actually becoming disgusted with the difference in the good food versus what's coming out of the industrial food complex, whatever you want to call it.
I work with medicine, but I also work with like food, wild food also. And one of the things I've noticed is that in order to really connect and form a broad web or a big table, you have to go to the people that you want to include. So as the organizers, it's like figuring out how do you actually show up, literally like at the home of the folks that are already empowered, for instance, with like agricultural knowledge and have been working the land for generations and are probably thirsty for things that are higher profit, like higher nutrition or whatever. And by profit, I don't just mean money. I mean like, yeah, more nutrient dense, just, yeah, all of those things. And there's so many little ways. I think just like keeping an open mind, being sensitive, using the intuition, like engaging the senses, just like in nature, how it's necessary to engage the senses, stay safe, like watch around you and see what's going on. It's the same in the like cultural environment, human environment. And there's lots of little things that happen, but like recently, like I hadn't found any wild mushrooms for a long time because it was so dry this year. And we had this huge flush of giant puffballs. And I was calling around trying to sell the puffballs, and like all the chefs that I normally sell to,
The rains.
like had already just been like saturated with puffballs. Nobody wanted to buy them. So I just showed up like in Owington, my little, rural town, and went in and I did sell a couple puffballs to like the pizza joint, and they were like going to put them on the pizzas. But then there were two customers in the shop that were like, oh my God, like, what is this? Like, tell me all about this. And so they ended up buying puffballs. And then I started talking to both of them. They found out I was an herbalist. And then I had two new clients that I have now had like several sessions each with, coming to classes. And now it's like it tapped into this whole new web of folks that I didn't know that have these little pieces of knowledge or whatever. And so I think, yeah, just like keeping an open mind and showing up and being sensitive and watching for those little key moments where you could influence the local culture, just like the more broad culture at large. And it really does spread really fast once that happens, because people reconnect with like, oh, okay, like I used to these boring mushrooms that everyone was eating, and now I have these super exciting new things. And so it's like, what else is there? Okay, well, if it's not there now, how do I shape the environment? Like, how would I manage my forest to allow giant puffballs to show up and grow more? And then you can really just start tapping into like a whole bunch of other stuff.
I don't think you can manage it.
I think the question was, what is each of us doing?
Yeah, like leverage points that you
And what is
see
his
to
leverage
do
points?
to do
Yeah.
the work. Yeah.
I've personally spent a long time when I was young trying to figure out what I was here to do, and quested and traveled the world and didn't care about anybody's expectations for me or getting a job or what I was supposed to do. I spent a lot of time figuring out what was the nature of reality that I hadn't been taught yet, because the things I've been taught didn't make sense. And then I found something that I thought no one was talking about that seemed really important. I started talking about it, and have been now for a long time. And I like the fact that almost every single person here has used that word that I created. So that's kind of cool. And I'm now traveling the world talking about this thing, which is the quality of food and the fact that there's variation. And but I think we each have a God-given calling and purpose. And the thing for us each to do is to find that within us and then follow it. And like you're talking about, reconnecting with people, just going and being you, and just, doing your thing and stepping out and the universe works in such brilliant ways. They say mysterious. I think it's completely brilliant. The connections that happen, and you put yourself out just a little bit, and some interesting thing comes out of left field you weren't ready for, and that leads to a whole other thing. And just getting up and getting out and just engaging life. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it's none of our business to worry about anything. Like, there's a story of the person who's in the in the canoe in the Amazon, and they can't see around the corner that there's a big a waterfall or something. Like, we don't know what's around the next corner. We can hypothesize, like, oh, the world's going to go into hell, or everything's going to collapse. There's going to be nuclear war. We're going to run out of hydrocarbons. Like, who knows what's going to happen? All we know is what we can do right now in this moment, and then what we shown based on what we do in this moment, what we can do the next moment. I truly do believe there's a greater order and consciousness and purpose and love that is the essence of all reality. And that thing is actually a charge, whatever you want to call it. And it's not our business to get out of our lived experience and try to worry about what's going on, because we aren't that. We are in each of our own individual beings, and individual being shown one thing to do in every moment in one physical body. And so, yeah, I think we're all these amazing, brilliant beings, and we're all being shown at every moment what the thing is to do and what not to do. And I'm sure all of us are used to doing the thing not to do and experiencing the results. But then as soon as you go back and then you should do, boom, all of a sudden the flow comes back to you. So I don't think it's anybody's. Yeah, I think that's it. It's just like we have the guidance within. We all have the path shown to us in our little insights, in our little thoughts. Your conscience does speak to you, right? People know about this. You get that little voice, however you experience it, of what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And if you just start to follow that, absolute brilliance comes from it.
Well, I really liked all the examples, practical examples of engaging other people in this process of leverage and change. And it made me think a lot of the folks that came up after my workshop to talk with me are actually in the process, at least of starting, or maybe going to be market farmers who are marketing to other people. And one of the things I've learned as being a market farmer over the last years, and also trying to get the local seed and the local foods for this area, landrace seeds that we talked about, was that if I engage those customers, say, put a sign up, if you like the taste of this, bring me that's the seed, so that you think it's, oh, I didn't even know I could say that. And then you got it back, right? So that engagement is so important, so that they're part of it. And I think the CSA, unfortunately, I'm not doing a CSA anymore, but that was a great way for people to really participate, because that's so needed. So anyway.
I was just going to add, you were talking about us having a calling, and we should go, with our calling. I would say, if you recognize something in your community or your region, don't sit around waiting for someone else to do what was revealed to you that needs to be done. Doesn't mean you have to do all the work, but start doing some talking with other people, figure out, are there other people interested in it? And sometimes it was revealed to you and you need to do it. So don't wait for somebody else to do it.
That's exactly correct. The thing you see needs to be done is the thing that you see needs to be done.
So for me, this festival was like that thing for me that was driving me to want to do this thing. Like I really wanted to do this thing. And so I don't know, do you have any sort of like a last thought, either Mark or Andrew has maybe one more thought, and then I'm also really excited to introduce the band that's coming next, because I think food, music, and good company over multiple days, when you have enough time to really drop into the experience of getting to know each other, is used to be really fucking normal. It's so not normal anymore. And so I'm just so happy to be here with you guys. But do you have any sort of last thoughts that you want to add about well, no. We got on this language. Closing comments from anybody. Does anybody have any closing comments? Because I think you're right. These practical examples, the puffball, the showroom, the hey, you like the way this tastes? Bring me back a seed. Like, this is awesome. And I really appreciate these really concrete examples of how to do the work.
I concur with all that.
Yeah. All right, guys, I think we're good. And I would like to introduce the Kings of Creon, who I think are just about ready to play for us. And please, talk about yourselves, because I know there's more connections to be made.